Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology. And this week, I wanted to talk to you about the lunar eclipse taking place on September 17th in the astrological sign of Pisces. Now, there are two types of eclipses in astrology. There's the solar eclipse, and then there's the lunar eclipse. A solar eclipse is when the moon moves in front of the sun and blocks its light in the sky. Total eclipses tend to be rather rare, but recently we've had a couple of them here in the United States of America, and the sight has been absolutely dramatic. Lunar eclipses always take place during a full moon, and during a lunar eclipse, the Earth moves between the sun and the moon, casting its shadow on the moon. Solar eclipses always look ahead, and lunar eclipses always look behind. A great example that I like to use to illustrate eclipses is driving on the freeway. Let's say you're driving on the freeway and you're listening to Siri, and Siri is giving you directions as to how to get to your destination. So you're driving down the freeway and you're looking through the windshield at all the cars and the traffic, and you're waiting for the next cue to come from Siri. Okay, you're looking ahead. You're anticipating reaching your destination and hopefully reaching your destination as soon as possible and with little, if no, incident at all. So let's say you're driving down the freeway and you're listening to Siri, and maybe the traffic started to gather a little bit, and you're over here on maybe the furthest lane away from the exit, and Siri suddenly announces, you need to exit now. Or you need to exit at exit 84 or something like that. And you're like, oh my goodness, exit 84, it's all the way over on the other side, but I have to exit now. And so you'll turn your steering wheel and you'll maybe honk to give forewarning. And you'll maybe I'm sorry to other passerby, the other drivers who are you drive like a crazy person. And you're going to do whatever you can to make that exit and go towards your destination. That's my illustration for a solar eclipse. That is not the way that I drive on the freeway. So a solar eclipse is this idea that you're going along in your life, you're looking to do your next thing in life, your next step, your next decision, your next business venture or romance, and then all of a sudden you get a signal from the stars that you need to go on a totally different direction, on a totally new direction, and you need to do it now. This is what a solar eclipse is all about. It's forward moving, it's forward looking, and when it happens in a part of your chart that really triggers the planets in your horoscope, it's something that you need to do now. It's urgent and it's inevitable. So solar eclipses really have to do with the sudden opening of a new or different path in your life. Lunar eclipses. Well, for the lunar eclipse, what we're going to use is the rearview mirror. Okay, you're driving down the freeway and you're looking in your rearview mirror to see the traffic behind you. So a lunar eclipse is always looking back over. That could be looking back over through a rearview mirror, or maybe even looking back over your shoulder to make sure that there's no one driving in your blind spot when you switch lanes. So the idea of a lunar eclipse is to be reflective, to look back over your shoulder, to think about the road that you've traveled and the time that it has taken you to get to where you are right now. A lunar eclipse will signify something unraveling or falling apart because it's feeble, because it's weak, because it doesn't have the vitality to continue on in your life. This could refer to a situation. This could refer to romance. This could refer to a dream or an aspiration. This could refer to a business enterprise. This could even refer to a health matter or a health issue. Why? Because the moon rules over the body in astrology. So lunar eclipses, if you're in a sort of weak or feeble place health-wise, this might be a period of time where you really feel that your body will not support your lifestyle or what you're doing with it, or an ache or a pain that you've been putting off. Now's the time when it really announces itself. That will be done during a lunar eclipse. So what you want to ask yourself whenever we have a lunar eclipse, and we will be having a lunar eclipse on September 17th, what you want to ask yourself is a question. what you want to ask yourself is actually a very simple question, which is, am I on iffy ground? Hmm? Okay, so am I on iffy ground? What does iffy ground mean? It means, do I not have secure standing? Am I not sure of myself? Do circumstances not support me? Am I hoping for the best while denying the reality? Okay, this can be all things that are associated to iffy ground, to shaky footing. And what you want to do is look back over your shoulder at the past 6 months, all right? This would be the period, I'd say probably around the spring equinox. So it's about the third week in April. Did I start a new path then? Did I start a new enterprise? Did I start a new job? Did I start a new relationship? Did a new situation come into my life? Was I having a health issue that I ignored and put off till tomorrow? What was going on around the third week of April, around the spring equinox? What was going on that you might have begun or initiated, or was a part of your life and you were kind of concerned about it, but you were putting it off because you didn't really want to think about it, or you couldn't find time in your day-to-day schedule to address such a matter. You kicked the can down the road, as they say. The question of, am I on iffy ground, am I on shaky ground, becomes pertinent with the lunar eclipse on September 17th. You want to ask yourself, how's that project doing? How's that business endeavor doing? How's that sale or how's that purchase doing? How's that relationship doing? How is this temple that I call my body doing? You want to ask yourself that question at this time. And if there are any sort of weaknesses, any sort of signs that, maybe you're not doing as well as you think, or if there is indeed a sudden collapse or something falling apart at the seams, then this indicates that it was on weak footing. Our inclination is to try to go and salvage the situation. If someone's in trouble, if we're in trouble, if a situation is in trouble, we want to go and salvage it. We want to go and rescue it. But that's not what I'm really talking about here. This isn't someone who suddenly fell over the side of the boat and you're like, oh, someone save this person, and diving into the water and helping to save them with a life preserver. Okay, it's not that. What it is that it's something that's been going on for 6 months. There's history. There is time to really sort of judge how it's been coming along in your life. Now, let's say it's a relationship and you were crushing on someone or you're starting to go out with someone and you're having this feeling of you know what? It's just not coming together. Or maybe you're having this feeling of you know what? They really don't call me back on their own. And I kind of feel like I'm a bit of a chore, the idea of them having to call back. I mean, why am I always asking for them to call back? Or maybe you're in one of those situations where they've never called back. I texted them 6 months ago. They haven't answered, but I'll still hold out hope. This is the time to acknowledge that it's over. Okay, this is the time to pull the plug if the plug hasn't already been pulled. If there's a business venture that's been sort of going along and not really going anywhere, it hasn't really taken off, this is the time to call it a day. If there's a project that's never come together, this is the time to say, not happening, or at least it's not happening now. If there was a sale or purchase that's been bogged down and it's gotten derailed and there have been all these detours and distractions and things like that, the beauty of a lunar eclipse is that it gives you the confidence to say, gave it my best shot, it's not working, let's pull the plug. Let's say it's over. Let's say it's the end of the day, all right? And so the lunar eclipse actually gives you the freedom to end something and to leave yourself open to something new. Now, the reason the lunar eclipse does this, okay, the reason why, even if you want this to come together, despite your best efforts, it just doesn't take off. Okay, the reason the lunar eclipse does this is because it's saying, you know what? This isn't working. This is dead wood. We need to clear this out in order to make room for new growth. And this is something I've learned a lot by being a gardener. I'm not an expert gardener. I'm very much an amateur gardener, but nature has a way of saying, you know what? It's autumn. Growing time is over. everything is going to seed and that's it. And I hope you had a fun time with your spring and your summer. It's over and we're now bringing in the next season. All right. So this is basically what the lunar eclipse is doing. The moon rules over anything that grows, whether it's body or vegetables or fish in the sea. Okay. Or even an idea. Okay. The moon rules over things that grow. And with a lunar eclipse, which is the eclipsed full moon, it's saying it's come to a stop. We need to get rid of this refuse in order to make way for new growth. Now, what if you happen to be involved in a relationship that's doing pretty good? You've had your ups and downs, you've had your obstacles, but you're solid. Let's say a business endeavor. Business endeavors can always be further along and more profitable than we think at the moment, but it's showing signs of life. I mean, it's actually really growing. And you know what? It just needs more time. It needs more effort. It needs more investment, personal investment or financial investment. If that indeed is what's going on, if something has begun, but it's really coming along, it may not be gangbusters, but it's robust and it's healthy, then a lunar eclipse says, you know what? This is the time to invest more in it. This is the time to spend more time. This is the time to invest more energy. This is the time to invest more interest and focus. This is the time to maybe invest more financing into it because this is something that's really growing. This is something that's really going to deliver for you. So lunar eclipses can be wonderful in judging what's working and what's not, getting rid of what's not, and putting more energy and investment and focus into the things that are. Now, this lunar eclipse that's taking place at 25 degrees Pisces on September 17th, this lunar eclipse is very unique. This lunar eclipse is very special. The reason why I'm saying that is because the eclipse takes place at 25 degrees Pisces, as I just mentioned. It's taking place in the last 5 degrees of the zodiac sign of Pisces. This lunar eclipse will be forming a sextile to Uranus at 27 degrees Taurus. Remember that earth signs and water signs sextile one another, so they're very supportive of one another's endeavors and very helpful. It will conjoin Neptune at 28 degrees Pisces. Again, this is very important for two reasons. One is that Neptune is the modern ruler of the zodiac sign of Pisces. And two, this is the last time that the lunar eclipse will conjoin Neptune in its own zodiac sign. What this lunar eclipse will also do, after it conjoins Neptune for the last time, with Neptune being in its own zodiac sign, with Neptune ruling the sign of Pisces, it will also form a sextile to Pluto at the 29th degree of Capricorn. Pluto will never return to the zodiac sign of Capricorn again in our lifetime. So all planetary aspects being made to Pluto at this particular period of time are cumulative, definitive, and impactful. So this lunar eclipse, it's sextiling Uranus, it's conjoining Neptune, it is sextiling Pluto at the last degree of Capricorn. This is the only time we're ever going to see this happen. We will have one more lunar eclipse in Pisces next year in 2025, but at that time, Uranus won't be in Taurus anymore. At that time, Neptune will not be in Pisces. At that time, Pluto will no longer be in the zodiac sign of Capricorn. So there will be no sextiles and there will be no conjunctions with the modern planets. So this is very strong. Again, as I said, because it's very unique, but at the same time, what I really like about this lunar eclipse is that it is conjoining Neptune, the modern ruler, forming sextiles to Uranus and Pluto. Uranus and Pluto are trining one another and both sextiling Neptune. What that means is that there is planetary support for this lunar eclipse. Support like this from the modern planets, believe me, is an extremely rare occasion. So what you have here is a winding up of old business, dotting of the I's, a crossing of the T's, tying up of all loose ends, and a preparation and support for crossing the threshold that will be taking place in 2025 when all the modern planets go from being in earth and water signs and moving into air and fire signs. So this isn't a Chicken Little moment, okay? The sky is not falling down, okay? Many people may be running around saying, lunar eclipse, the sky is falling, and things like that, and being all kinds of alarmist. But no, not with the sextiles and the conjunctions involved of the modern planets. The sky is not falling down. So what's going on here is that you are saying goodbye to something in your life. The time has come to bring things to a close, but it's being done in an encouraging, supportive way. It's being done in a fashion that you can see for yourself why the time has come to end or complete something, where you can see for yourself why it's time to transition to something new, but it won't be abrupt, it won't be insensitive, it won't be dramatic, it won't feel like you're being uprooted or tossed out of something. It will be supportive, it will be confident, and it will fill you with courage and optimism about what comes next. Aries. This lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces says it's time to let go of the old baggage. Now, I want you to think of organizing a closet, or for me, it's organizing my books. Okay, I have a bazillion books. And I also have a pretty overfilled closet when I think of it. But anyway, when you make that time to go and organize your closet or reorganize your books or desk or something like that, the intent is to go and purge all the things that you don't need anymore. Like, I don't need these clothes, or I'm never going to read that book, or I can't believe that I have these Post-its from like 2.5 years ago. And so you maybe show up with a garbage bag or a waste paper basket, and you're ready to, empty everything into this and clear things out. But as you go through that closet or you go through the books, you might find yourself like, oh, these were wonderful shoes, or this was a shirt that, I really love, and oh, I can't believe I haven't seen this in a million years, or oh, that's a wonderful book. It's one I've always wanted to read one day. And so you start to get lost in reverie. You start to get lost in, I can't throw this out, or you start making exceptions. And suddenly that intensity of purpose, that urgency, sort of dilutes. You start making exceptions. You say, oh, I want to hold on to this, or I'm sure I can find a place for this. And you might even end up in a situation where that closet or that bookshelf or that desk doesn't look very different from the way it did when you began, all right? So this is a period of time when it's time to dump the old stuff. Okay, as I said, these could be old clothes or books or things that have been taking up space on your desk, but these can also be old memories. These can also be old commitments. These can also be old obligations and old responsibilities. These can also be old expectations. This isn't the easiest thing for an Aries to do under the influence of a lunar eclipse in Pisces. Okay, Pisces is going to make you feel more sentimental than you would usually feel. It's going to make you feel more attached to things than would be the way that you would usually respond to something like this. But nevertheless, it's important for you to press ahead. It's important for you to press ahead with the purging of old things. But something that I want you to focus on here, something that I want you to press ahead with here, is old familiar behavioral patterns. These might be the things that you tell yourself when you're going through a rough time. This might be the way that you prod yourself to get up and over things. This might be the way that you keep yourself lean and mean, either physically or psychologically speaking. The feeling here with the temper of the planets is that perhaps you've been too severe for too long. Even athletes, for instance, know that when they're training, you train really hard and then you have to sort of take time off to restore or recharge the batteries, and then you can go at it again. But the best sort of training isn't giving your all out all the time, but in pacing yourself. Sometimes as an Aries, you can be hard on yourself more habitually than effectively. You can press your nose to the grindstone. You can insist that you clamber over that next obstacle and challenge. You may also find as an Aries that the old baggage could also refer to old grudges, old scores that you want to keep going because they drive you, they provide motivation. And there's a sort of austerity that Aries can embrace because there's this feeling, and it comes from Mars being your ruling planet. It comes from this feeling that if you relax, if you take time off, if you take it easy, then you've grown complacent, that you've said that an obstacle has beaten you, that a problem should exist because you didn't have the determination to overthrow it. So there can be a hesitancy, a resistance of Aries to get rid of the old things that drive you, the old motivations, the old mantras, the old self criticisms. And this is the time to get rid of them. This is the time to let them go because some planets like Neptune and Saturn are moving into your zodiac sign next year. So, what the lunar eclipse in Pisces is trying to do is to empty out the things that you don't need anymore to make room for these planets moving into your zodiac sign, where there will be new motives, there will be new expectations, and the way that you used to do things doesn't work. But one of the nice things that will be taking place is that you don't have to drive yourself so hard. And that really testifies to a newfound confidence in your abilities and your capabilities. When you don't have to drive yourself so hard, you can actually focus on the task at hand and you can accomplish and master it with half the effort, with half the grunt work that you gave these sorts of things before. Taurus. This lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to be wonderful. It's going to be wonderful because it sextiles Uranus, which has been introducing all of these upsets and these turmoils in your life. And it turns Uranus from being a revolutionary planet into being a revelatory one. Instead of Uranus being rebellious and overthrowing things, Uranus becomes enlightened. It has a way to process its thoughts, its revelations and epiphanies add to your life rather than overwhelm or overtake. We also have the additional presence of Neptune conjoining the moon and Pluto, which also forms a natural trine to the zodiac sign of Taurus. So this is a wonderful time for you. You probably have been aware that things have been changing in your life, that things have been coming to a close or an ending in your life, but it's been gradual. It's been relaxed. It hasn't been anything that's sent alarm bells or caused any sort of great stress or anxiety for you. What it sort of reminds me of is gardening. And, and when you garden, hopefully, if you're gardening well, you have beautiful plants and you have lots of flowers. You have like lovely roses and all sorts of flowers. Well, the thing that you do after you've had your blooming cycle is you do something called deadheading. That means you go through all those roses that used to look beautiful and now there's nothing left but the heads of where the flower used to be, and you cut them off. You prune. You go through all the cosmos, you go through all the dahlias, you go through all the echinaceas or the snapdragons, and you deadhead. You take off the spent blooms and you cut back. And the reason that you do this is in order to promote new growth. Flowers and plants respond wonderfully to deadheading. It's kind of like getting a haircut. You're cutting back the spent growth, you're cutting back the dead branches, and that reinvigorates the plant itself. And that's what's going on here with this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces. You're sort of going back over things that are spent in your life. They've run their course, and you're deadheading. You're cutting back. You're bringing them to a close. You're doing things to promote new growth, to make them robust again. And there is this feeling of contributing to continual growth as you do this. And this is what the lunar eclipse is going to bring for you. So I'm not expecting anything really drastic or anything difficult for you. I'm expecting more something along the lines of getting a trim, cutting back on those obligations that have outlived their purpose, weeding out those responsibilities that have overstayed their welcome. Hello, Gemini. This lunar eclipse, this one's going to be a bit challenging for you. When I was looking over the horoscope, what it put me in mind of, well, it put me in mind of this reading that I once had with the famous astrologer, Michael Luton. I went and had a reading with him when I was going through a very difficult time in my life. Michael at that time had done a bunch of paintings to show off what was going on with the different signs or what the different signs were grappling with during this period of time. And one of the paintings that he had done, he showed me as we were discussing my horoscope. And it's an image that has always stayed with me because it was one that was like, oh my God, and also made me laugh at the same time. There was the, oh my God, of like, oh my God, that really resonates with me. But also what came out with this burst of laughter of like, but it like resonates maybe a little bit too closely. It was something that I really appreciated because, as I said, I was going through a very, very difficult time. And this is why Michael is such a gifted astrologer. So, what was this painting? What was this image that I was looking at? What it was someone looking down at their hands and their feet, right? So, it was a POV, it was a point of view image. And it's a woman. It's a woman who's looking down at her hands and her feet. And she's looking down and she's standing on the ledge of a building and you see the street way down beneath her. Okay, so she's obviously stepped outside a window and is looking down at the street, and she's several stories above it. And the other thing that she's looking down at is her hand. And in her hand, she grasps an Oscar. Okay, it's the Oscar statuette. And so here she is standing on the ledge of a building with an enormous drop, and she's holding this Oscar statuette. And it was such an amazing image because what it talked about was the idea of accomplishment. You know, obviously, this was an accomplished actress, or maybe she could have been an accomplished screenwriter or director, producer. She had an Oscar statuette, and she's now looking at throwing herself out the window, literally. Or she could drop the Oscar statuette. You know, she could also be standing there and thinking, I'm not going to throw myself out this window. I'm going to throw this Oscar statuette out this window. And this is something that I see is going on with you, Gemini. You've reached a time in your life of great accomplishment. Maybe you've done all the things that you've set out to do, or maybe you've realized a success, a keynote success in such a way that you have no idea of how you're going to repeat it. Maybe you have no idea how you're going to sustain it. Maybe it's something that you've always wanted to achieve, a place that you've wanted to get to in your career, a place that you've wanted to get to in life, and you've been awarded for it. You know, you've been recognized for this. But holding on to this is creating despair for you. Okay. Maybe you don't have the capacity to continue in this function or in this way of life, or maybe you simply have no idea of what comes next. And maybe it's driven you to a point of like, not only do I not know what to do with this, but maybe I'm taking wild risks. I'm doing crazy things. I'm going for broke, or maybe I'm putting on the facade of like everything's great and I'm so, successful at what it is I do. And I'm going home at night to despair or depression or high anxiety. All right. So it's a choice. It's a choice between you and the Oscar. Okay. It's a choice between you and that accomplishment, that achievement, that status, that place that you've gotten to in your life. It's hard to let go of a sense of accomplishment, of a feeling of accomplishment. It's hard to let go of a trophy, but that's the important thing to remember. It's a trophy, all right? You are you. You have a life. You can walk away from this, okay? You might even be at a point where you need to walk away from this. Or this may simply be a transition in your life where you're losing something that gave you a very powerful sense of accomplishment and identity. Lose the trophy, all right? Let go of the trophy, because holding on to that trophy is taking you into a place of either actual peril or psychological or spiritual peril. When you let go of the trophy, and make sure there's no one underneath when you drop that Oscar, um, when you let go of the trophy, it can be very liberating. It's frightening letting go of such a thing, letting go of such a thing that gave you definition and status in your life, but it's also liberating. Maybe not right away, maybe not tomorrow or next week, but in the weeks to come, you will find it to be very liberating because it allows you to explore something new and something different. Maybe what you'll come to see is that you've gone as far as you can go on this particular career path or life adventure. Or maybe what you'll find is that by leaving the old things behind, the old accomplishments behind, the old expectations behind, this frees you up to create anew, or to explore a different avenue in your life, or to explore a different part of your personality. What I would also recommend during this time is what we used to call in acting class a trust exercise. And the trust exercise would be that you would stand there in class and you would close your eyes and you would fall backwards, and the other actors and actresses in your class would catch you. And this was a big trust exercise. And people always made jokes about it and things like that, but no one was ever dropped and they were always caught. Well, what this lunar eclipse is also asking you to do is to trust in a trust exercise, to let yourself fall back into the arms of loved ones and friends, the people that matter, the people who care about you, because these are people who could care less about the trophy you're carrying. What they care about mostly is you. And they're the ones who can show you that you and your happiness is the greatest prize of all. Hello, Cancer. This lunar eclipse in Pisces is going to be a very supportive lunar eclipse for you. It forms a sextile to Uranus in the zodiac sign of Taurus. It forms a conjunction to Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces, in its own sign, and it sextiles Pluto in the zodiac sign of Capricorn. This lunar eclipse is all about here versus there. You're feeling very much caught up in there, okay, wanting to go there. And you may feel frustrated in your aims to get there. Now, what's there? There may be a place, there may be a goal, there may be the future that you envision for yourself. There may be release from a predicament or a difficult situation that you're in. There may be the light at the end of the tunnel. But in any case, you are definitely moving towards that place that you want to be. And so that means that you are saying goodbye to the here. You are saying goodbye to where you've worked. You're saying goodbye to a relationship you've been in. You're saying goodbye to home or friends or family. You're saying goodbye to the comfort and security of a predicament or dilemma. Yes, predicaments and dilemmas can create their own comfort zone. So you may be saying goodbye to that as well. But being a water sign, and more than that, being a Cancer, you may find yourself hesitating at the threshold. Being here creates a sense of belonging. It creates a sense of familiarity. That could be a habit, that could be a routine, that could be a ritual that you practice. So there may be hesitancy about moving forward, about leaving the here to go there. What this puts me in mind of, and I've often put in mind of this when I think and talk about the zodiac sign of Cancer, is waves on the shore. okay? The way that the wave curls and falls upon the shore, it spreads out in all directions to the thinnest points of its reach before it begins to gather itself back again. Now, not all the water comes back. It may bubble there on the sand. The powerful part of the water does find its way back. It is pulled back into the next wave that builds and curls and falls upon the shore again. And this is the way that Cancer does things. These are the actions that Cancer takes. Now, when we think of action, we often think of, like, I don't know, a goal that needs to be achieved, or these are your action steps, or it's time that you fought for what's right. It's time that you took action. Okay. And that fits certain signs, and that goes with certain temperaments, certain elements. But for the water signs, they make decisions over and over and over again. It's just like that wave that falls upon the shore. Now, you might think, well, are they questioning their decisions? Are they revisiting their decisions? Do they have doubts? Do they have to sort of reaffirm things or bolster confidence? Perhaps, but not necessarily. What it is that a decision is made again and again and again. It's something that they experience in themselves. It's an emotional thing. As the wave falls upon the shore, as they take that action in their lives, as they stretch out as far as they can go, the water signs, particularly Cancer, leads with its hopes. It leads with its imagination. It leads with what it envisions. It leads with its scenarios. Imagine scenarios. This is how something could happen. This is how something could be. And it stretches out as far as it can go. Sometimes Cancers might even exhaust themselves with all of these psychic vignettes that take place. And then the water gathers back in again. They sense that growing wave and they fall upon the shore again. One might say, well, this is rather repetitive. This is rather like, okay, we're making this decision again and again and again. How many times does one make a decision? Or is this all to bolster resolve? Again, let's return to the image of water, okay? This is how waves shape shorelines, okay? Waves don't shape a shoreline by falling on the sands once or even 100 times. They shape shorelines by falling upon the sands again and again and again. It's like, I don't know, the Grand Canyon. We all know the Grand Canyon as being vast, enormous mountain range that's huge and vast and majestic, And right at the bottom of the Grand Canyon is this river that runs through it. But if you're standing at the top of the Grand Canyon, you look down, you see this river. It doesn't really seem like much. What we don't always remember is that river, that body of water, carved out the Grand Canyon over centuries, over millennia, over eons. That river that we see at the bottom began as an elemental force that carved through that rock, and it resides there still to this day. And this is the way that Cancers act. They repeat like the waves. They are just as relentless as that water that carved the Grand Canyon itself. Perhaps you're familiar with the phrase, there's no there there. It's recently come back into fashion. It will often mean like whatever you're trying to accomplish, wherever you're trying to get to, there's no there, there. In other words, you're not going to find what you're looking for, or the destination isn't going to be worth it. Or maybe this is a plan that's directed towards these objectives and it's not going to reach those particular objectives. Now, this phrase, there's no there, comes from the writer Gertrude Stein. Gertrude Stein, we know mainly as being the leader of a salon in Paris. She was an American expatriate from a very well-to-do family. And she basically provided a salon, a space for people like Ernest Hemingway and Pablo Picasso and F. Scott Fitzgerald, among other luminaries on the bohemian artistic scene in Paris, to come and chat and visit with one another and maybe show off the latest painting or read from the pages of their novels. And she would sort of like reside over this with her lover, Alice B. Toklas. Well, Gertrude Stein originally came from Oakland, California, East Oakland, California, in fact. And so when she relocated to Paris and created this whole new life and identity for herself, there was a period, I think she had written an opera, Four Saints and Three Acts, I think it was called, and it was touring the United States. And it had come to New York and it had gone to Chicago and was touring. Well, it came finally to San Francisco. And she and Alice went to go visit her family home in East Oakland. And when she was a girl, there was a farm and there were eucalyptus groves and there were rambling rose bushes, and she drove to East Oakland and those eucalyptus groves were no more. Those rambling rose bushes did not exist. The farm was gone. And she muttered to herself, she shared with Alice, there's no there. And so what this came from was not a derisive remark, but a remark of having come home and to discover for herself what she knew all along, which was her home was gone. So Cancers, during this period of time, when you're leaving here to go to there, and when you may be dealing with this idea of like, there's no there's no return to what you are leaving. What I want you to remember is that there will always be a here. And that even though you can't return to the place that you've left, you carry in your here, that's here, your memories, your history, your routines, and like the moon, never stop cycling and recycling. There may be no there, but there will always be a here, wherever that might be. Hello, Leo. The theme of this lunar eclipse in Pisces is cutting losses. Cutting losses because you're not going to get back what you are owed. Now, that's not pleasant, all right? If someone owes you money, if someone owes you a favor, if you were there for someone, it's natural to expect that someone's going to be there for you. But what you are going to come to realize during this period of time of the lunar eclipse taking place over your horoscope is that it's time to cut losses. This feeling of someone owing you is holding you back. This feeling that someone owes you is keeping you down. Maybe you're a kid. Maybe you're a kid who feels like your parents owe you. Your parents owed you security. They owed you home. They owe you understanding and support and recognition. During this time, you will come to accept the realization that they can't do it. Maybe you're a parent. Maybe you're a parent who sacrificed for your child, who worked really, really hard to put a roof over your kid's head and a bed for them to sleep in. This will be a period of time in which you realize that your children cannot pay back that debt. Maybe you feel like the world owes me a good life. The world owes me a place in society. The world owes me some kind of recognition or some kind of reward for all the hard things that I've had to do, for all the difficulties I've had to endure. Not only does the world owe me, but life owes me. This feeling of someone owing, the world owing, life owing, that there's a debt that's owed to you. This realization that it's not going to be paid that you're not going to have satisfaction of this. This is a time for you to finally accept this realization. Now, there's a big difference between acceptance and resignation. Resignation is taking on more of a resigned attitude, for lack of a better word. There's more of a feeling of defeat or surrender that's associated with resignation. I was owed this, I can't collect on this anymore, and I'm resigned to the outcome, but I'm not happy about it. And you might even carry that grudge or that bitterness forward about the incident. Acceptance. What happens with acceptance? Acceptance is an ability to look at the other side of the situation. Acceptance is an ability to look at the other person and to accept that they can't pay you back, that they don't have the funds, they don't have the capability, they don't have the ability, okay, to do this. And so there's an acceptance that that's where the person is, and I'm not going to get what I'm owed. Acceptance can be, okay, my parents owe me a lot. They weren't there for me in so many different ways. Well, they're still not there for you now. That's not going to change. So do you stay in that place of insisting that they pay you back, insisting that they be the parents that they should have been? What's the point of it? It only continues the anger. It only continues the bitterness. It only continues this feeling of being bereft. Let's say your kids can't come through. Let's say you did wonderful things for your kids and your kids wiped out. They didn't fulfill expectations. Maybe they were self-involved or could care less about you. What is the point of bemoaning that? What is the point of looking to them to become human beings that they aren't going to become? Maybe they dealt with restrictive circumstances, limited circumstances. Maybe they had to take care of themselves first, and had nothing left over for you. What's the point in insisting that they pay you back, that they be there for you in a way that you were there for them? The simple fact of the matter is you were there for them and you helped them to grow in their lives. And expecting something to be returned to you, that's no way for you to live. And this feeling that the world owes you, that life owes you, the world owes a lot of people, a lot of things. Life owes all of us a lot of things. One's almost tempted to say, take a number and pick your place in line. You could grow old waiting for such a thing to happen. What is also going on is that you could grow blind to yourself. You could overlook you waiting for something like that to happen. This feeling of the world owes me, that life owes me, this can become a great bitterness and a great depression and a great resentment. And it paralyzes and it leaves you an empty husk of grudges and regret. When you cut your losses, and I'm not saying you have to do this from a place of forgiveness or a place of knowing. You can be like about cutting your losses. When you cut your losses, you cut the ties that have had a vampiric hold on you. You're not going to get back what you invested in something. Maybe it's a business or investment. You're not going to get back what you invested. Any business person knows that the worst thing you can do is throw good money after bad. You want to cut your losses. You want to get out of that situation as soon as possible. And that may also be what's facing you nowadays, Leo. But also I want to talk to you about this in terms of others owing you on a more emotional, psychological, psychic, and even spiritual level. They do owe you. No one's disputing that. But whether you're going to get what you want, that is very much in question. And to follow the inclination and the ideas being introduced by this lunar eclipse in Pisces, it's better to cut ties and to preserve yourself and to recuperate and to heal than it is to continually wait with arms crossed for someone who just isn't going to show up. Hello, Virgo. This lunar eclipse in Pisces is going to be very sobering, but it can also be very empowering. You have been at odds with a certain person in your life. Maybe it's an authority, maybe it's a partner, maybe it's people who were once close to you who are no longer close to you anymore. Maybe it's someone that you used to work wonderfully with, and now you've just reached an impasse. And so there may be a lot of disappointment. There may be a lot of bitterness that's associated with this. You may even feel in your private moments like it's all their fault. It's all their fault that the relationship didn't work. It's all their fault that the business didn't prove profitable. It's all their fault for withdrawing support, for not being there, for not believing in you or your common enterprise. It's all their fault for never taking responsibility for their actions and for their deeds and for their words. Now, we have all gone through it's all their fault moments. Okay. This is as human as anything else in our emotional and psychological vocabulary. And we also know that blaming someone else and saying it's all their fault is not a place that we can stay in our minds and in our hearts and expect any sort of satisfactory resolution. What's going on here with the lunar eclipse opposite your sun is that it's also forming sextiles to Uranus and Taurus, a conjunction to Neptune in its own sign of Pisces, and a sextile to Pluto in Capricorn. What this lunar eclipse is allowing you to do is to slough off the old behavioral patterns. You can see for yourself what isn't working in your life. You can see for yourself that taking the stance of blaming others isn't going to work for you. Okay. Now, your response to this is not self-blame or self-criticism or raking yourself over the coals. What it is really owing up to your part of the situation. Now, is it an equal part of the other person? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. There's this kind of assumption that when we become reflective and that we take up our own, our own part in the matter, that it's automatically going to be equal. And that's not always the case. Sometimes we were the domineering personality and we have more to owe up to than the other person does. Sometimes it's the other person who was very much at fault and very much absentee and very much difficult and problematic, and they have a larger share. But this isn't about shares or apportioning shares of blame. What this is about is really, what can I take out of this situation that's going to help me? Remember, it is the moon that is being eclipsed, not the sun. And the sun right now is in the zodiac sign of Virgo. So this is really asking questions of yourself. When you blame others, you give them the power of your life. You hand over the reins of your life. You hand over the power of your life to them. They're the reasons why all these horrible things are happening. Well, if they're the reasons why all these horrible things are happening, then the sooner you get yourself out of that situation, the better, right? And so the sooner you bring to an end a relationship, the sooner you bring to end an association, that would be a good thing. But there's also something to do with atonement. There's also something about making peace. And that's why you really have to examine your part in the matter. What have you done to contribute to this situation? Have you had a part to play? And was it not a great part? If any of those ideas are relevant to you, then it's important for you to own up to your part of it so that you can let that go right now. This is the dead wood that I was talking about earlier, that the lunar eclipse clears the way of in order to introduce fresh growth. If you can let go of old behavioral patterns, patterns that weren't good for you, these often take the form of regrets and remorse. If you can let go of things that you did, not the regret, but acknowledge what you did that was regrettable and change it. Remorse, remorse means to harm yourself again. That's the etymology of the word. When we have remorse, when we feel bad about something, we harmed ourselves when we did something bad. And with remorse, we harm ourselves again with guilt and with regret. So, what this lunar eclipse offers you an opportunity of is to end all of this by owing up to what you brought to the situation and by making different choices. The first choice, as I said before, may be to leave the situation, the relationship, or the association. Another choice may be to see the part that you played in it and to rewrite that script, to rewrite the way that you're going to be. That's not going to happen next week or a month from now, or maybe even next year. But it begins with a realization and it begins with a resolve to head in that direction. And as you do that, you will find that you close the door on these past behavioral patterns that have not been helping you, that you cross the threshold into a new life, one that's different, but still has its roots in the old you, that you can do these things. And that instead of passing the reins over to someone else, that you've taken back the reins. And once again, you are in charge of your own life. Hello, Libra. This lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces takes place at a bit of an awkward angle for you. It will confirm suspicions that you've had for a very long time, but at the same time, you're not going to have the clearest idea of what to do to change the situation that you find yourself in. Now, in some regards, you may have inherited a situation, one that you didn't really go and ask for. If you remember the earlier part of today's episode, I was talking about how 6 months ago, you might have begun something, a creative endeavor, a relationship, a purchase, or a sale, or a new life path. And lunar eclipse will ask, are you on iffy ground with this? Is it still holding strong and is it still holding true for you? If it's enfeebled, it will unravel and fall apart at the seams. And if it's showing strong signs of life, then this is a period of time to invest in it. Now, 6 months ago, you inherited a situation that you didn't really ask for. Okay. So it sort of changes that setup that I had introduced before earlier in the episode. You didn't really begin it, you're taking over it. Okay, so there can be this feeling that you're both bolstered by the legacy of what has come before you, but at the same time that you are having to pay for the sins and the foibles and the faults of what has come before you. All of this without a feeling of really having chosen this for yourself. And that's what I mean by this lunar eclipse taking place at a bit of an awkward angle in your astrological chart. You're going to feel like you have to persevere, like you have to keep going on this track, but you may also have the growing realization that the old plan doesn't work anymore, that what was set in motion before you took this over doesn't work anymore, and you have to somehow revise it. Now, in a perfect world, you would be able to do one of two things. You would be able to sort of stop the action and say, okay, we're taking some time off. The old plan doesn't work anymore. And so I'm taking off, I don't know, 6 months. And when I come back, I'm going to have this new plan that's up and it's ready to go. And that's going to be our real beginning. Well, you don't have the luxury of doing that right now. The other option that you don't have is, hey, I inherited this situation. It wasn't my idea. So what I'm going to do is distance myself from my predecessor or distance myself from the person who was in this position before. And I'm going to start saying, well, it's their fault that everything went wrong. But, me, I've got this new slant and take on things, and this is really good. And you're going to want to be on board for this. You're not in a position to do that either. So you're really stuck in this predicament. But it's one thing to be stuck in a predicament and a dilemma. That could be like being stuck in a rut. But you're stuck in this while being moved into totally uncharted territory. Totally uncharted territory where you have to think on your feet, where you have to improvise from day to day, and you have to give the impression of continuity while making things up as you go along. Now, as a Libra, you're actually pretty good at this, okay? Your ruling planet Venus is very good at repackaging. Your ruling planet Venus is very good at doing makeovers. Named after the Roman goddess of love and beauty, she knows how to make the adjustments to give the appearance that everything is wonderful and beautiful and alluring and appealing while covering up the things that are defective or at fault or are having a rough time of it. Now, as I said about lunar eclipses, this may be a revelatory moment that takes place on September 17th. This may be a time where things really unravel and fall apart, and you can't help but show that things were really held together by spit and glue, because the spit and glue has fallen apart and you're left there with the wreckage. That may be what happens on September 17th, and that may expose everything right off the bat, and you may have to decide between picking up the pieces or just walking away from it all. This can refer to a relationship, a business enterprise. Probably it has to do with your job because of the placement of the lunar eclipse in Pisces. And so that might be something in which it's just unsalvageable and you have to like owe up to it. Or if things don't fall apart, if they don't unravel, you may be getting a go ahead from the stars of like, you know what? You started off at a disadvantage. You had the wind against you, the odds stacked against you. But you know what, Libra? You're pretty good at this. And you know how to like change with the changing direction of the wind. And this may actually be a very exciting period of time for you. If that's the case, where you feel like after September 17th, you're still in the game, then this may be a period of time where you very much want to invest more energy, more of yourself in what's going on, where you are building on everything that came before. Don't expect mastery of the situation, but at least you're going to be making a convincing argument that things look like they're full steam ahead while you try to figure out how to get your bearings in this uncharted territory. The other issue that I want to bring up with you would be a question of the toll that this is taking on your body. For instance, what comes right to mind whenever we're dealing with the moon is, what are your sleep patterns like at night? The moon rules over sleep. It rules over dreams, the dreams that we have at night. The moon's function in astrology is to be restorative and to be refreshing. And that's what happens at the end of a long day. We go to sleep and we dream, we relax. And when we wake up in the morning, we feel restored and refreshed. But there may be other ways that you're pushing your body. Libra is an air sign. Air signs are very much about the mind, and they can live in their head. And what can happen with air signs when they're having difficult relationships to the moon in their chart is that they can fall into that mind over matter mindset, where you keep pushing yourself mentally while not registering the effects that it's taking on you physically. So this is something that I would very much encourage you to monitor and to track and to follow. If there are any sort of health issues or aches and pains or anything that's symptomatic of something, this is a period of time to go and get a checkup and to see what's going on. Because there's a very good chance that if there is a problem, that you would be nipping it in the bud. And if you're heading in a direction that's not great, this gives you the opportunity to rehabilitate, to move it back into a more healthy direction. So, in the spirit of Libra and fairness, you want to give your body equal say, and you want to listen to it in the same way that you would listen to your mind. Hello, Scorpio. This lunar eclipse in Pisces is going to be absolutely wonderful for you. Pisces forms a trine to the zodiac sign of Scorpio. Water understands water. And so this is a very supportive and a very simpatico type of energy. Moreover, the moon will be forming a sextile to Uranus, which has been in your opposite sign of Taurus. Uranus in your opposite sign of Taurus has been sort of pelting you with wild curveballs from out of left field for years now. And even though you've sort of gotten a sense of what's coming at you, it really hasn't stopped. There's always been rude awakenings and unexpected surprises taking place through your relationships and your associations. Most of these probably have to do with the trouble that the people closest to you in your life has gotten themselves into and the way that you have to pull their fat out of the fire. Well, during this period of time, the oppositional energies of Uranus in Taurus to your zodiac sign of Scorpio are quelled. They're even softened. And that's because the moon will be forming a sextile to Uranus in Taurus. It then carries its light to a conjunction in Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces, and it concludes by forming a sextile to Pluto in Capricorn. So, this is a period of time where you are going to feel very at peace with yourself and the people in your life. If there are people who have failed you or disappointed you, they're either out of your life by now or they're on their way out of your life. You really don't have the time or the energy for them. Gone are the days when you might have rubbed your sores and counted vendettas and the points against someone who had spoken ill of you or done you harm. Gone are those days. And what we have at the end of Pluto having been in Capricorn and Neptune winding up its time in Pisces is a gentler and kinder Scorpio. You've realized at this point in your life that it's not worth having that kind of anger or holding those kinds of grudges against people because the person who suffers is you. The person who carries that energy, that negative energy, is you. So instead of carrying around this anger, this resentment, this bitterness, you've decided, and wisely, just get rid of the people who have let you down. Just get rid of the people who have caused that kind of enmity in your life. So, what do you think of the people in your life now? How much do you treasure them? How much do you enjoy them? This is really what the lunar eclipse in Pisces is all about. You feeling this bond, celebrating this bond to the people that you love in your life. Scorpio is an autumnal sign. So there's always this feeling of, well, how long is this going to last? How long is this love going to be? When I truly bond with someone, are they going to be taken away for some reason? And that has a lot to do with fear and anxiety, which can be underworld or Plutonian things. But when you've gone through a sustained passage of the modern planets, as you have in these past few years, you've gotten to a place where fear doesn't rule you. Now, do you have fears and anxieties and apprehensions? Yes, we all do. But you've gotten to a place where you're not going to let that fear dictate your life or overrule your life, that you are really going to be in your own life, that you are going to inhabit your own heart, that you are going to inhabit your own circumstances, and you're going to enjoy the people in your life for as long as that might last. Now, that might sound very philosophical, or it might sound very spiritual, maybe even abstract, but it's something that as a Scorpio, you now feel in your gut. Now, people might say, well, maybe you've just reached a point of acceptance. Maybe you've even reached a point of, I've got nothing left to lose. But it's more foundational than that. It's this realization, this understanding that if you don't live life to the fullest, that if you let yourself be harassed by fears and anxieties, that you're never going to really come into your own. This lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces, it's testifying to the fact that you have finally emerged, that you have finally been reborn, and now you can enjoy all the joy of living. Hello, Sagittarius. The lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to be taking place in that part of your solar chart that has to deal with hearth, home, roots, your father, and the end of the matter. Now, that sounds like a lot, but basically what it refers to is the part of your chart that deals with the IC, which is an abbreviation for the Latin term imum culi, which means bottom of the sky. We know it in astrology as the midnight place. It's the bottom part of the chart. It's the roots. So instead of thinking of your status or your future or your destiny or your aspirations, ambitions, and accomplishments, your gaze will be directed towards your foundation. It will be directed towards your roots. First of all, do you feel at home in your home? That may be a very big question right now for you during the time of the lunar eclipse in Pisces. For instance, 6 months ago, you might have experienced some sort of difficulty with the issue of home. Maybe that's when the leaks started or the furniture began to give way. Maybe that's when you began having difficulty or trouble with loved ones. Perhaps you left your home 6 months ago, or perhaps you moved into a new home 6 months ago, and now you're beginning to see these ailments, these difficulties. As they say, home owning can be very expensive because there's always one thing that needs to be repaired after another. So this may be something that's weighing very heavily on your mind, where you may be asking yourself, do I keep going with this? Did I move into a money pit? Am I losing myself in my home life and all the problems and the difficulties that I face? So this might be a period of time in which those Sagittarian responses, those innate Sagittarian responses, which are usually along the lines of escape, get out of, or gallop away as fast as you can, in which all of those feelings and impulses may be getting triggered, and they may be getting triggered really quite powerfully. Now, no one's saying that you have to sit this out. I mean, you may be involved in a home matter or a real estate venture or a situation with a loved one in which you've done everything that you can possibly do, and now it's time to just call it quits or say it's an end to things. And as I said earlier in the episode, anything that's feeble or weak, anything that's on iffy ground will unravel and fall apart during the period of time of a lunar eclipse. And so this might be a time in which you have to acknowledge that you've done everything that you can, and you have to let things go. You have to let them fall apart. And instead of salvaging the situation, you may be faced with having to move on, and what the cost of that may very well be. But there could be other things that are going on as well. The fourth house in astrology is known as the house of the father. Recently, there's been some confusion. People will call it the house of the mother, but it's actually the house of the father. And what that comes from is 2,500 years of astrology. For 2,500 years, the father's name was the name that was passed down from one generation to another. For 2,500 plus years in the West, a father had control of the estate. He had control of the finances. Even if, as a husband, he married a wife who had more money than he did, for a number of centuries, it was the husband who was in control of that money, who was in control of that estate and of that name. So this is how the fourth house came to be known as the house of the father. It was a reference to intergenerational wealth of a name or wealth being passed down through the family line. And so there may be issues with your father that are coming up right now. They may be issues in which you feel very much apart and like things have dissolved between the two of you. And you might find yourself wondering, do I really care? Do I really want to try to restore things between me and my father? And you might even have a secret feeling of like, maybe it would be easier to have life without dad. Okay. And that might be something that's going on. Or there may be a feeling of it's time to restore ties and to refresh them. What can also be going on, and what I would ask you to take a look at, is patterns in your father's behavior that might be reappearing in you. Some psychologists will say that this is environmental or that it's learned behavior. In astrology, we kind of will refer to it more as something that's been passed down from one generation to the next. And you may be playing out a part of your father's life story that you might not really want to be playing out. And what's wonderful about a lunar eclipse is that it gives you the opportunity to step out of that old set of clothes and to try on a different set of clothes. So, this can be a period of time in which you might be recognizing patterns of your father that are playing out in your own life. And this might be a period of time when you are released from the blindness of force of habit, and when you can see and recognize what's going on, and that you can become mindful of the different choices that you can make, that your life is your own life, and that you can perhaps follow in the footsteps of your father or parent. But that doesn't mean that you have to repeat everything that they've done. And that doesn't mean that you can't go and choose your own path. So that's something that may also become very available to you right now. Finally, this part of your solar chart has to do with laying things to rest, with bringing matters to a close, with tying up all the loose ends. That happens during a lunar eclipse anyway, but because this lunar eclipse will be forming a sextile to Uranus in Taurus, a conjunction to Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces, in Pisces, and a final sextile to Pluto in Capricorn. In fact, all of these aspects are taking place for the last time in your life. This is a period of time in which you may very well be laying things to rest, in which you may be concluding matters. And you're doing it from a place of compassion and mindfulness. Now, if you choose to ignore it, or to say, I don't have power of this, or to do what's habitual, then it will continue, and you will be burdened by unfinished business. You will be burdened by things that you didn't take care of. So it's a very good time to be conscious and aware of bringing things to an ending that need to be brought to an ending, of tying up loose ends. And by saying those things that you should have said to someone, because you may be parting company and you may not be living on the same coast or in the same town or in the same state anymore. So, this is the time to make those things known, to have your say, but you want to do it in the Piscean temperament of acceptance, compassion, and letting go. This is not a time to settle old scores, to bring out the accusations, to go and be angry and to, rub those old wounds again, those old sores again. This is a time to be compassionate, mostly because that's a beautiful and wonderful thing to do and is very accessible when Pisces is very strong. But on a practical level, it frees you from regrets and remorse, grievances, and that feeling of, I wish I had done this at a time when I had to do it. Take advantage of the time that you have, that this is a time of things unraveling and coming apart. This is a time of separations and departures and letting go. And you want to do it in the best way possible. You want to do it in the same spirit that you originally said hello and when you greeted someone. So if you can part company in that same spirit of greeting, then parting company will not be so painful. And parting company will also allow you to be at peace with the decisions and the choices that you have made. Hello, Capricorn. The big question that you'll be asking yourself during this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces, taking place on September 17th, is how do I get there from here? This is a big question for you. With Pluto winding up its stay in your zodiac sign, it recently re entered your zodiac sign and is still there until about mid November. You are in a very different place now than you were when Pluto first entered your sign in 2008, 2009. You've gone through the ordeals, you've gone through the tumult, you have descended down into the underworld of yourself, you have rediscovered yourself down there in the nether realm, and you have come back up. You have made that reascent. You have ascended back to the place that you had lost originally in 2008. But as a result of this, you have thrown off old things. You have thrown off old relationships. You have thrown off old associations, maybe even an old identity and an old sense of status. But you've also emerged into a reborn you. In some ways, the old you is still there. You may still have your relationships and certain associations and friendships. You may even have experienced the return of these things into your life, but you are reborn. There is a new you. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you were a brunette and now you're a blonde or anything along those lines, or that you went ahead and lost those 120 pounds that you were carrying. You might have, but that's not exclusive to this. This reborn you is that you are centered in yourself in a way that you have never been centered in yourself before. You've done more than survive Pluto, having gone through your zodiac sign. You have thrived. You have come into your own. And what this lunar eclipse in Pisces is going to point out is that you still want to get places. Capricorns are always ambitious. Capricorns are always driven. Capricorns always want to get to the top of that mountain because that's where you feel you are your best self. Well, right now, you came down off of your previous mountains and you have reemerged in the valley and you're looking at a new place to go. You're telling yourself, I'd be happiest if I could only get there. The problem is you're not really clear on your here. Okay. You're not really clear on what would make you happy. You're not really clear on the things that you used to be clear about, your routines, your lifestyle, your to-do list, even your discipline and your practice. You're not clear on these things. You might have left them, or you might have simply outgrown them. So you're looking at the familiar. I want to be there, I want to be on top of that mountain, I want to be striving for excellence in my life, but your motives have changed. Your expectations have changed. Your process has changed. And this is what I want you to really be open to now during this period of time of the lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces. You may want to go back to familiar practices. You may want to take up those criticisms and those lectures that you used to harangue yourself to get yourself out of bed and to push yourself as far as you could possibly push yourself. You're going to find right now in your life that there's a big part of your psyche that's just not interested in it. Now, that doesn't mean that you've lost your ambition or your drive or your creativity. You have those things. But what you're asking yourself right now is there a better way to do it? Now, this isn't really about life-work balance, although that's always a burning issue for Capricorns. But what it's really about is there a better way to do it? Goats don't always choose the steepest part of the cliff to try to scale. There might be other ways. There might be other footpaths. There might be other approaches. And that's what I want you to encourage yourself to be open to. There may be people who are coming into your life right now who have different ideas about how you could do this. There may be people who are coming into your life now who are lending their support, who are making resources available, who maybe even want to be fellow travelers on this journey of yours, on a journey that you're used to being alone and taking by yourself. This is the wonderful headspace. This is the wonderful heart space that I see you moving into. So what I would advise, Capricorn, is less focus on your ambitions, less focus on your goals, less focus on the way that the picture should be and what you want the outcome to be, and more focus on your process, more focus on your approach, more focus on the way you go about things. We don't often get the opportunity to change these things in our life. But right now, because you've been in such a transitional place between rebirth and the new start, you understand these things on a guttural level, on a visceral level, in a way that you never have before. So you have an opportunity to employ new techniques, to engage in new collaborations. So not only will these ensure that you will get there from here, but they also ensure that you will have a wonderful time doing it. Hello, Aquarius. This lunar eclipse in Pisces is going to be a very profound one for you. It's going to be profound because you can sense what's at work, but it's not going to be easy for you to articulate it, much less describe it. What's going on here is that Pluto has retreated back down into the zodiac sign of Capricorn. In some ways, you're going to feel a little bit like, have the gains that I've made since Pluto entered my zodiac sign in January, am I backsliding? Am I losing that progress? Am I slipping back into old patterns of behavior, into old ways of being, into old ways of seeing myself? That's not what's really going on here. Certainly not that Pluto is forming a sextile to the moon in Pisces, and that it is also being supported by trine by your modern planet Uranus being in the zodiac sign of Taurus. Now, typically, these signs don't really have much to do with you, other than Taurus, which forms a square to Aquarius. And that's what I meant, that there's this feeling of something profound taking place, but not really being able to articulate or figure out what it is exactly. It's taking place on a more subterranean level. And what's going on here is that with Pluto's retrograde back into Capricorn, it's checking in to see if you're all right with the steps that you have taken since it entered your zodiac sign in Aquarius. Are you all right with a new direction in your life? Are you all right with the way that you're stepping up to the plate? Are you all right with this feeling of actually coming into yourself, of growing into yourself? Are you all right with this feeling of centrality and confidence? Now, Aquarius is a zodiac sign that tends to really focus on the needs of the group, on the needs of the collective over itself. Aquarius believes very much that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But with Pluto moving into your sign, it's given you a more solid sense that you're not anonymous in this role, that you actually have a big role to play. And you might have found yourself moving into a new position at work or in your family, in the neighborhood watch committee, even your bowling league, but that you found yourself moving into a more leadership or executive position. So, with this feeling of sort of backtracking, of slipping backwards, the period of time that Pluto was moving through Capricorn, Pluto was in Capricorn from 2008 until recently, was a time in which you saw a lot of growth, but you did battle with a lot of inner demons. You did battle with anxieties, you did battle with insecurities. You might even have done battle with patterns of self-sabotaging behavior during that period of time. And recently, you've gotten to a place where you've either made peace with that or maybe even mastered it. But anxieties and fears don't just go away like that with a wave of the wand. And anxieties and fears don't just go away because you've named them or partitioned off areas of your being where you can now house them. They still have a role to play. And hopefully, they can play a constructive one for you. We often talk about facing our fears and even mastering them. But fears have a lot to give. Fears can also show up with caution, with scrutiny, with not taking things at face value. fears can also show us the limitations of ourselves and the limitations of other people. Fears can also point to biases or anxieties or suspicions that we might want to address in a more enlightened manner, a more welcoming manner, that we can give a place in our soul, that we can give a place in our mental thinking for fears to reside. They can become warning systems. They can advise us against bad choices. They can get us to stop, look, and listen. So fears aren't always things that need to be vanquished, and fears aren't always things that need to be dispelled. They can be very useful and they can be very constructive as well. This lunar eclipse in Pisces may act as a kind of reassurance, that being an Aquarius, which is an air sign, you can have a tendency to really identify with your mind. And you very much subscribe to the motto of mind over matter. And that can be mind over matter like tangible things like your body, or mind over matter as in the matter at hand. That if I'm faced with a problem, a dilemma, or a predicament, that if I apply my thinking and mind, that I will master it. By letting yourself befriend those apprehensions and anxieties and giving them a place in your consciousness, something that's very accessible to you now because of the lunar eclipse in Pisces, you're going to find that right now, some of the things that you've worried a great deal about will unravel and fall apart. They'll be exposed. They're not a big deal. And so part of you may be relieved, but because Saturn plays a big role in your temperament, part of you may be all too ready to take them up again, in a sort of prohibitive way or a sort of like, better watch out way. But there is a way that you can re-engage those fears, apprehensions, and anxieties in a constructive manner, in a holistic manner. And discovering how to do that instead of making yourself do that, that's the story of the lunar eclipse in Pisces. It's something that will allow you to take what had once been inner demons or hostile forces or self-sabotaging patterns. It can allow you to take these things, embrace them as being parts of yourself, and transform them from enemies into allies. Hello, Pisces. This lunar eclipse in Pisces is going to impact you most of all. Not only does the lunar eclipse take place in your own zodiac sign, but this is the last time that a lunar eclipse in Pisces will conjoin Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces. This is the last time that a lunar eclipse in Pisces will be forming a sextile to Uranus in Taurus. And this is the last time that the lunar eclipse in Pisces will be forming a sextile to Pluto in Capricorn. All three planets will be leaving the astrological signs of earth and water and entering into the astrological signs of air and fire next year. So as you can imagine, this is a cumulative time for you. This is a time of fulfillment. This is a time of putting things right. This is a time of atonement. Now, the way that I want you to look at this lunar eclipse in Pisces is, what if you had the ability to set things up for your next incarnation? When we talk about reincarnation, we often talk about past lives, and past lives can be a sort of romantic and an exotic affair. We can feel like we have a soul connection to someone, and we might say, oh, we must have been lovers in a past life. Or we may feel like we are going through difficulties in our life right now. And we might feel like the reason I'm going through these difficulties is to atone for what took place in my past life. And now I have to resolve it in this one. So a lot of the focus when we think about the idea of reincarnation in past lives is to look at the past, is to try to remember who we were and where we had come from. And we can do this in a series of ways, like past life regression, or we go to workshops, or maybe even have a hypnotic trance where we can see things in which we feel like we experienced a past life flashback. But what if you had the ability to set things up for your next incarnation, to set things up for your next go round? What would you take with you? And what would you leave behind? Those are the questions that I want you to ask of yourself during this lunar eclipse in Pisces taking place on September 17th. What would you take? What are the things that you like about your life? What are the things that you love? What are the things that you cherish? I'm not asking about the things that frustrate you, the things that have caused you pain, the things that have created remorse or regret. I want you to tap into your joy. I want you to tap into the things that you're proud of. Maybe it's an accomplishment. Maybe it's the way that you showed up in someone's life and continue to show up in other people's lives. I want you to focus on what you would take with you into your next incarnation, what you feel happiest about, most proud of. And I want you to put energy behind that in this scenario that I'm asking you to participate in. Now I want to ask you, what would you leave behind? What disappointments? What failures? What self-incriminations? What regrets? What are the things about you that you would leave behind? Maybe there are ways in which you wish you had acted differently. A moment that you could relive in which you had given someone the thing that they had asked for and you had decided to withhold. These are the things that I really want you to meditate on and to be mindful of during this lunar eclipse, because these are the adjustments, the realizations, the changes that you can make in your own life now. With the modern planets moving out of the water and earth signs, with Neptune never returning to Pisces again once it leaves it in 2025, with Pluto never returning to Capricorn again once it leaves it in 2025, with Uranus not returning to Taurus for another 84 years. So basically, these are things that we will never see happen again in our lifetimes for most of us. This is a time of atonement. This is a time when all those things that you wish had taken place can take place, at least on an intentional level. All right? And it's a way of reconnecting to yourself and your energy as you leave this past behind and enter into your future next year. And the wonderful thing about it is that you don't have to expire and incarnate again. The wonderful thing about it is that you can do it right now in your life. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.